right, so we can go ahead and get started. So hello everyone, Matt Volm, CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. Also, quick kind of plug for everybody, RevOps AF 2024, our inaugural RevOps conference is going to be held in sunny San Diego at the end of May. If you haven't already, snag your early bird tickets, which are on sale at RevOpsAF.com. You'll be able to meet the crew that's here in person at the event. You'll be able to hear ocean waves, get that SoCal sunshine, bump knuckles with a bunch of your RevOps friends who you may only know over the internet. So go check that out. We dropped the link in the chat. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get rolling on the topic of today, which is going to be 5 RevOps quote to revenue train wrecks to avoid and how to avoid them. And we are kind of fortunate enough to, well, one, I think when this whole group got together, we were like, how do we come up with just 5 things that we've done wrong in the past and share those? Because we've made plenty more mistakes than that. But we did boil it down to 5, which is good news. So we're going to share what those are, and then we're going to share some things about how you can actually fix them or avoid them before they happen. But with that, I want to first introduce our panel that we have today. So we've got Mark Lerner, who is a director of growth marketing over at DealHub, which is a leading quote to revenue platform. Definitely worth checking out. They're a formal partner of RevOps Co-op. So if you're in the market or evaluating CPQ and quote to revenue platforms, definitely give them a look. And then we've got Anthony Enrico, who is the founder over at LeanScale and all-around RevOps expert. But what I want to ask you guys before we move on to kind of sharing all of the battle wounds that we've got with quote to revenue, share one kind of interesting personal fact outside of work, outside of RevOps, outside of the professional landscape. Mark, I'm going to start with you. What do you got for us?
Good, because I think Anthony's is going to be much cooler than mine. I when I'm not doing this, besides excuse me, besides being a dad to 2 crazy little boys, I enjoy snowboarding. And a fun fact was, in college I was on the school's snowboarding team, which is a bit of a misnomer. We just called it a team because we got more funding. So it was mostly just a group of people that got together and went snowboarding, and that's my claim to fame.
All right, so you still a snowboarder?
I am, yes.
Okay, all right. Any I was gonna ask, like, how many train wrecks have you had on the slopes snowboarding? But
luckily, knock on fake wood or whatever, I haven't had any broken bones. I've had some close calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. As I get older, I'm much more cautious. So
Yeah, that's true. Wiser, that's what I call it.
Sure.
All right. Anthony, what about you, my friend? Mark's a dad. He's an avid snowboarder. Apparently was we'll say co-captain of the snowboarding team back in college. What do you got us?
Yeah, not hitting the slopes in Phoenix too much, unless you're sand snowboarding. But I think one interesting thing, I do have 2 little ones as well. So I have 2 beautiful, well-behaved, amazing girls. I'm kind of I thought I wanted boys until I had girls, and I'm very, very happy that I have them here. One interesting fact is I used to be a wrestling coach. So I was a wrestler for a long time, and then I coached a little bit for a few years, and then have always maintained an interest in grappling, combat sports. Great workout, great way to get some of your adrenaline out as well. And having 2 little girls, they also still like to wrestle around and fight too. So I still get to use all that training.
That's awesome. All right, so we've got a snowboarder, we've got a wrestler. I do neither of those things, but I am I guess we certainly do have fatherhood as a common thread. I've got 2 boys. They do a lot of wrestling, for sure. So I'm gonna send them over to Anthony's house the next time they're getting my nerves.
Yeah, and here we have a live picture of me.
Yeah, after a day. Yeah, this is well, this is getting into our first RevOps fail to avoid, also, and a good analogy for Mark after a day on the slope snowboarding. But no, so all right, so again, we're covering kind of 5 different RevOps, kind of train wrecks, quote to revenue, kind of train wrecks to avoid. So the first one we're going to get into is operational rigidity, which, yes, that is a word in the sales process. And so first, let's talk about what that means and maybe some examples of kind of Anthony and Mark that you've experienced in the past where this has gotten in the way.
Sure. Yeah. So I can tee it up a little bit about, we were talking about all these different kind of examples that Anthony had, and how we were going to kind of, put them into different buckets. And so, the thinking behind this in terms of operational rigidity in the sales process and kind of generally is one of the things that I've observed and that we talk about a lot, is how quickly kind of the pace of change overall has increased, and how the kind of negative impacts that could be born from being rigid in any sort of process or system internally, that is just unable to kind of adapt or change quickly when needed. And as the stakes get higher and the economic challenges increase, the downside and the risks of that kind of increase as well. So that was kind of the overall idea. But I think that this kind of will be a fun foray into the first train wreck example that we have from Anthony, and hear a little bit about his experience and chat about it. So lay it on us. What's the first train wreck under the operational rigidity world?
Yeah, happy to share it. And I was laughing with Matt and Mark before. I was like, I'm a little reluctant to share some of these because I don't want people to lose confidence in what I do, but I promise you will at least not see Lean Scale make this particular train wreck again in the future. This one is actually before Lean Scale, from a past life. I was working in an organization where very, very process driven, very very rigid process, following all of these steps and everything that we had laid out. And we had a CRO that had a 20-step or 20-stage sales process. So when you open up opportunity, there'd be 20 stages that you had to go through because it was checking every single box that person expected every rep to go through. Which I don't know if anybody's worked in a place like that, but it's I saw somebody say riot. Yeah, there were a few riots, potential strikes from the sales team going through it. And I think this is where the idea of process gets in the way of the outcome of process. So the idea of, okay, if we're very process driven, process oriented, then we're going to be able to, scale and streamline everything. But you do have to leave, what Mark was alluding to, you have to leave room to be agile and make sure that you have guidelines, especially for something like a sales process, which is very fluid. This was also enterprise sales too. This wasn't like a transactional model where maybe you could be a little bit more rigid, but this was a nuanced sales process, and it was just completely over prescribed. So
Yeah.
I think that was an absolute dumpster fire of a process if I've ever seen one.
How long did that last before it was just untenable?
For the tenure of the CRO, and then new one came in and changed it all up.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it was that way for probably about a year.
Wow.
Can you share just like, I'm curious what some of the stages were called when you've got 20 of them. Like, and do you have any idea like entry exit criteria? Like, did those exist for each of, like, I'm just curious like how, I don't even know if I could make up a 20 like sales process if I tried. So I'm curious what some of those were actually called, Anthony, if you remember.
there was absolutely a entry exit criteria for each and every one. So it was very detailed, but there were a handful of discoveries. So like 4 different discovery stages. So initial ICP, then it was use case discovery, then it was like the champion discovery and going through like who the champion should be, and I don't know, 4 or 5 stages around there. And then there was discovery follow-up sent. then it was like discovery follow-up reviewed, then it was some form of proposal created, proposal sent, proposal reviewed. It was
Okay.
like a task. Take your typical stages and then add like 5 sub stages to it, and then they had to go through each and every one.
Yeah. So Rich actually asked he's like, all right, devil's advocate sort of question. We're obviously initial reaction to 20 stages is like, whoa, that's a lot. Were there any positives? Like, was there anything that the 20 stage process actually, like, I don't know, outcomes produced? Like, was there anything positive about that?
I'm trying to play that role really well. I would say the one thing is it started to train the muscle of putting process in place. So at least people cared about process and people were interested in having a process that we followed. So I would say it built the muscle to have that conversation and think about it.
Yeah. And I guess hearing some of the things you mentioned, right? Like, like those different discovery stages, right? Like you do want to know those things, right? Like you do want to know, like, hey, like is there a good, like, is there an ICP fit, a use case fit, like all that stuff, right? But that doesn't mean that you're gonna have separate discovery conversations or stages for those things, or that one needs to come before the other necessarily. And same thing, like on the proposal, like, yes, obviously you go through all those steps to execute on a proposal, right? You got to send it, but it doesn't mean that like that's a separate stage, right? So,
Yeah.
so yeah, so all right, so we laid out the like that particular train wreck, right? 20 plus stages and kind of the ideas getting in the way there. So how do you avoid it, right? Like obviously there's things like less stages, but maybe like let's start there. Like what are some of those solutions to this? One, how can you think about this beforehand, right? So you don't wind up in a stage or in a place where you have a 20 stage sales process. But then two, maybe, and I sure hope not a whole lot of people out there are in a place like that, but if you are starting from somewhere like that, how can you, maybe get your company, get your org to the right spot?
Yeah, and I don't want this to just be singled out to sales stages. It's just one example of what I'd say is over process engineering. So putting
Yeah.
too much process in something that doesn't need it. And I think that happens in one of 2 ways. You're either over processing something that's simple, or you're bringing big company processes to a smaller company. So I kind
Okay.
of see that happening in both angles. And what my COO at LeanScale likes to say is, avoid playing house. Like, are you putting processes in place just because you think you should be doing something? Or are you focused on the outcomes and letting the outcome drive the level of process that you need at that time? So I'd say that the way to avoid it is look for the outcomes and then put in the right amount of process that gives you the right amount of agility to change if you think things may take a different direction as you continue to grow.
Yeah, and I would add that, have the humility to allow things to be questioned, right? I think there's a lot of, kind of technical debt, or whatever the equivalent is, that ends up being added into these things, and fields in the CRM or stages on a life cycle, and no one really wants to question it. They just kind of add on top of it, and because it's there, they assume there was good reasoning for it, but perhaps the reasoning for it was not, it was relevant 6 months ago and no longer relevant. And if you don't question those things, and if you don't allow those things to be questioned, then you're going to just have it pile up and turn into 30 stages on a sales cycle or things like that. From my perspective, I think, when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, it also, I think, tends to, cause this, where everyone wants their idea involved, and you compromise by adding it as a separate stage or whatever. So I think one of the things that we've seen is having a really strong kind of guided selling motion is a great way to avoid the kind of overburden, adding so many stages, adding so many questions, and being redundant and all these things. If you have a well thought out kind of guided selling motion where you can kind of get through those things quickly and in an efficient way. It removes the need or the risk of having to add kind of crazy additional things, and it can also be adaptable to change as you see how people interact with it and how it impacts the overall sales cycle. So that would be kind of my addition to the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And two things I'll mention to just close us out on this are one, Anthony, you said it right. Focus first on the outcome, or at least the thing that I use, like, what problem are we trying to solve, right? Before we start talking about a solution, right? Which is the whole, like, playing house or like playing business, right? Is like, well, what's the thing we're trying to solve for, right? And then let's talk about like how to solve for it and what those solutions are. And then the second thing, Mark, you mentioned it, like humility to ask questions, but also, like, I think individually, right, give yourself permission to change your mind. Meaning, if you are responsible for, let's say, like the current sales, let's just on the sales stage, right? Like on the current sales stages within your pipeline, right? Like it's okay to eventually say, like, these are no longer right or relevant for us and we should change them. Like, just because you did something doesn't mean it's got to be like you did something that was right at the time, and businesses changed, right? Things change. So like it's okay. Like, you don't, if you try something and it doesn't work, like do the next thing that does. Don't feel like you're stuck and like you need to dig your heels in. So totally agree with those two things. And since we were kind of just talking about sales stages, sales process, and kind of over engineering some of that stuff, which leads into kind of the second thing we're going to hit on today, which are core guardrails for reps. And
Can we
so
just take a moment to appreciate the gifts that are on this
oh yeah,
book? Like
I
I
was gonna
really
say
was
we've
the whole
got
time I was working on it, I was just glowing with how
yeah. And as you know, we've got like a stationary dumpster fire here. We've got a floating dumpster fire here. And
yeah.
as everyone knows, at RevOps Co-op, we are big fans of GIFs and memes. And so Mark brought his A game on all of these. And so yeah, so let's talk about guardrails for
Yeah.
reps. Obviously, I mean, if you have something like a 20 stage, kind of sales process, clear entry and exit criteria, over engineered sort of process. I think that's one end of the extreme where there's, probably like, I don't even know any ways that you could, work your ways around that. But let's talk about Anthony and Mark, where you've seen examples of real life examples of poor guardrails for sales reps.
Yeah, and I think I love I love some of the things that Anthony brought up when we were chatting about these, and I'm excited to hear them. But yeah, I think if if reps are incentivized to hit quota, and they're going to act in accordance with the incentive structure, and if you don't have very clear kind of rules, it's just that's the way it's going to go. And so I think we've all kind of seen over our careers people kind of dipping their toe over the line slightly. I don't think we've all maybe not seen the more extreme cases, but it's super important, I think, especially as sales teams grow, sales organizations grow, and someone in something like a revenue operations role to be able to sleep at night, kind of know that there are certain rules in place for things like offering discounts that are beyond kind of what's acceptable and things like that. But I'm really excited for Anthony to jump into some of these train wrecks because they're awesome.
Yeah. So let's go the other way. Too much process, and then this one's too little process. So
Right.
I did CS before I did RevOps. I was a VP of CS at this company, and then worked really, really close with the sales leader. And then the sales leader at that time had maybe 5 reps or so. And we still felt small and scrappy, and still felt like, this is a tight-knit team, and we don't want to overprocess things. I came from the place before that had 20 stages. So I was like, let's just keep things simple. And one of the things that we empowered the reps to do is to put together their own order forms and their own contracts. And we had templates in Google Docs, and this is how it needs to be. And then, the CRO would review everything before it went out. So it wasn't like we didn't have any process. But what ended up happening is we had one rep, we had a commission plan where you got paid for a 12-month deal on the booking, which is pretty standard. So you get 10% of 12 months. But we had a rep who was burying a term for convenience clause in the contracts. Like our MSA was probably, I don't know, 20 pages or something. It's a technology company. And burying term for convenience clause, like not even in where it should be, but just like hiding it in a different area. And was selling deals like this for over a year and probably closed over, at the time, we thought $1 million worth of bookings, and then cashing in very big commission checks, hitting accelerators, doing really, really well. And then I was on the CS side, and all of a sudden I had people asking to cancel and to churn. And I would say, hey, you're in a 12-month agreement. Let's figure it out. What's going on? And they're like, no. I worked with so-and-so, and they said I could cancel anytime. And it's in our agreement right here. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is awful. So we realized that so many of these deals had this baked in to their agreement, and they could cancel whenever they wanted. So we had to support that and try to triage as best as we could. But not having, not to turn this into too much of a plug for DealHub here, but not having a CPQ, CLM type of solution in place, even thinking, hey, the CRO is reviewing them, he's looking through them, but he doesn't have time to look through 20 pages and find the one sentence. We weren't able to have that level of control. So it turned into a really big disaster. We had a lot of churn that we weren't expecting. All my goals were on churn, so I had a bunch of churn hitting my OKRs. That was a big issue. That rep wasn't with the company anymore after that. So I don't think anybody ended up winning in that situation.
Yeah, that one. Like I could hear the kind of collective gasp in the audience. But yeah, that was my experience, my reaction to it as well. It's pretty. I
had Rich's reaction. I think he put "damn" in the chat.
Exactly.
That's
how
I felt.
I think we're all thinking it. And yes, if they had had DealHub as a solution at the time, wouldn't have happened. And so definitely, if anything is a good selling point, it's that. But I think just generally, I know that as the velocity of sales increases, and that whoever the CRO, whomever is kind of overlooking that, I think that one of the things that keeps them up at night is making sure that there aren't deals going out that are going to get called back, or going to against whatever kind of rules, or added too many discounts, or has terms that aren't really acceptable, and maybe kind of giving those folks a little bit better sleep at night is something that feels pretty good. So I'm happy to work at a place that can offer that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I just want to add how to avoid it. There's solutions for it. Don't expect your CRO or VP of sales to act like a lawyer. They have plenty of other things to do and sift through contracts and review things. And this is an area where maybe more process is better. So I would index to process more than you might in other areas of the business.
Sure. Yeah. And I think we, again, talking about like ways to avoid things like that. I know, one, we talked, there's obviously software companies, technology solutions, right? Like DealHub that can do some of this stuff for you. And then to your point, Anthony, there's also, this is a place where, like evaluate your process, right? To make sure that the right people are looking at the right things. So I know like in the past, one of the things that I've done when I was on the VP of BizOps side was and we were, again, small enough organization, so process wise, all like essentially like we owned the deal desk, right? So all deals were sent out by us, meaning reps were not able to send agreements to customers for signature, meaning they could not edit like a big MSA like that, because I knew that I was the one who was essentially creating it and getting it sent out. Now that obviously works for, an amount of time and a number of deals, and then eventually that manual process gets to be way too much for any one person or any one team. But there are things, to your point, that you can do with your process to try to, have the right sort of guardrails up. Because yeah, the last thing you want that sales rep was probably like this guy, right? Whoop,
Exactly.
right over there, like every single time, and he had that same smile on his face too. So so yeah, like again, to your point, focus on the outcomes that you wanna drive, have the right sort of guardrails, tools, process in place to support that. And yeah, especially like to your point, right? Even when you're a tight knit team, even when you feel like you've got a good group of folks, like, money is a big motivator for people. And just like that's the whole point of having those guardrails and process, right? It's not because you don't trust people on your team. It's just because like that's the thing that's going to be the best for the business. So yeah, don't forget about that. All right, so we got through we're through two of the five. Uh
Mhm.
got another strong GIF here as well.
Guy,
So
you can't have a you can't have like a thing with gifts without having this guy. So
exactly, especially when you talk about complexity. So yeah, so overdependence on complex tech solutions. I know we've kind of hit on this a little bit throughout some of these other ones, but Mark, I'll turn it over to you to kind of kick us off on the train wrecks here.
yeah. So I mean, I think that we all kind of have experienced something like this where um either we come into a role and these things already are in place, or maybe we were very enthusiastic about adding a new solution and it turned out to create a level of complexity that was like far greater than the expected. But we're in a time now where we're shifting from an overabundance of budget for little tools that every individual operator can kind of bespoke choose their tool, to there's a lot of consolidation happening. And so I think there's a lot of reflection on the current tech stack and understanding where can we cut and where is there too much complexity. And so this is definitely a relevant point for the time that we're in. And there's definitely some exciting and interesting stories that Anthony's got for us on this one.
Yeah, this one came my second VP of RevOps role. Um, I was feeling pretty confident myself, and actually the managing or the founding partner at Lean Scale, his name's Enrique Sakai. He was always my systems architect at all the companies that I went to before we started Lean Scale together. And we created a pretty sophisticated system to track everything in the go-to-market lifecycle, timestamp things like MQLs, SQLs, when they're moving through stages, and then when things close, we had a lot of automations. And I really relied on those, then created all my dashboards. I had my executive dashboard, sales, marketing, and CS1, so I could see everything that's going on and have all the data at my fingertips. And one of the flows was misprinting a timestamp for an SQL date, so sales qualified lead date. Some people use like an open opportunity. And there was a population of opportunities that were getting stamped with this date that was inflating the sales qualified lead numbers. And because I was so confident in how our setup and Salesforce was working, I didn't really do a lot of manual checks or manual reviews of the data. I just paid attention to my dashboard. And I realized we were inflating SQLs by about 20%.
Oof.
And that was going on for almost a year before we caught it. And that was pretty devastating because we had built plans on those SQL numbers. We had built marketing budgets on those SQL numbers. We share those SQL numbers to the board. We paid commissions to SDRs based on SQL numbers. And I mean, it was, I just felt like I fell flat on my face. And it really made me cautious and careful to not spend time digging a little bit manually into data. And no matter where you are and what size organization, what level of sophistication you have in your systems, the manual reviews of data and manual checks on data is going to be necessary. So that's why public companies have audits and people come in to take a look at data and take a look at everything that's going on. But doing it at a startup company too is really important as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the risk inherent in some of these things that are, even if it seems like a slight issue, the downstream risk is huge, like you said. And so, the level of complexity in any given tool has to be considered. It could be marketed as the most powerful X for what, thing for X for Y, but if it requires, a coded solution or, long, engagement with a third party provider in order to make any sort of changes or audit, the risks are pretty high, especially now.
Yeah. And so, and I think I know I've got plenty of examples too of ways where technology solutions is just been over engineered or unnecessarily complex. And also like a lot of times, right, are going back to some of the things we talked about earlier. If you think about problems first and solutions second, a lot of times we do things in the opposite order and we start thinking first about solutions, which inherently for a lot of us means, well, how do we solve this with technology? And so that's where you wind up in a spot where, right, you're like, oh, well, I'll use AI, or oh, like I'll build a flow, or like, oh, we'll do something, right? But it's like, well, why? Right? Like, why are you doing that? And so now that we've talked a little bit about that particular problem, and especially Anthony, you mentioned like this was going on, for a year, right? And you compensated people on this, you made business decisions, planning decisions based on this. How did you, actually, like, how did you catch that particular error, right? Like, what made you realize that you were overinflating things? And then how did you kind of course correct for that? And how could you have avoided some of those things up front?
Yeah, I found out because SDR was very, very noble, then came forward and said that there was an extra SQL on their commission report.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, let me go see why. And then I saw that it was an opportunity that shouldn't have been tagged with an SQL bait that ended up on this SDR's report. And most of the SDRs would probably, if they had anywhere from 20 to 50 meetings booked, they might have one of these on their report. So I would say I don't think anybody was being disingenuous or like trying to cheat the company. I just think it was a small population on the micro level, but added up to a lot on the macro.
Yeah.
So they brought that to me, and then I was like, oh my goodness, this is not good. And then I started pulling some data based on that, and then I realized like, oh, this is like a 20% inflation problem, and realized like the dashboards were built wrong and all kinds of stuff. So that's how I found out. Now, in order to avoid it, one is encouraging data ownership. So I think this would have helped if people own their data, own the presentation of their data, rather than having somebody else present it for them. I think that can go a long way because it forces them sometimes to see some anomalies. It might be easier for an SDR to think like, oh, there's one SQL off rather than like RevOps overseeing the whole thing, might not notice it. And it's also not impacting our commissions and things like that. So we might not see it as much. Whereas on the micro level, if people own their data and own the presentation of their data, then they'll probably point out anomalies more often. So I think that's a big one. If you have a culture of data ownership and presenting your own data. And then the other, so something that I think we could have done is just taking an interest in the data and manually digging through and looking for specific cases. And I'm not saying looking for problems, but even just having a level of intimacy with your data that would enable you to find something like that, and really knowing the details of the data that you have access to. I don't think I was doing that enough in that role, and I learned my lesson for it, and is not something that we make that mistake twice. So
Yeah.
I think that's how I found out, and that's how I'd avoid it in the future.
I think I would add to that it's important to always remember that complexity does not equal, powerful. Like the more complex solution is not always the best solution or the most powerful solution. There is beauty in simplicity, but there is, simplicity can be more scalable. If you have a solution that requires, automating one object that then kicks off an automation on a separate object that then is relying on another object, each one of those is a point of failure that becomes increasingly difficult to catch. And therefore, when trying to find a solution, minimizing the amount of, let's say, on the CRM objects that it interacts with would be, a metric to always keep into consideration, because the more objects or, disparate fields that this solution interacts with and changes and relies upon, the greater the likelihood that something will go wrong, and it will be much, much harder to find.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, to your point, Mark, right? The more points of failure you have, the more opportunities for failure exist. But also keep in mind, right? Like no piece of software or technology or anything you do is going to be 100% perfect 100% of the time. Even 99.9% of the time still means that like something is going to go wrong. And think back to all these examples of, right, like these, like big software companies, like, right, what was it like? Was it a couple months ago? Like HubSpot was completely down because of like some Cloudflare issue, right? Like, so these are massive software technology companies that like when something breaks, like it can cause huge disruptions. And same thing applies to anything that you build within your technology stack. So yeah, even if it's one of those things where you put a 30-minute block on your calendar like once every month and be like, hey, I'm just gonna go and like spend 30 minutes spot checking data that impacts the reports or dashboards that my executives view, right? Like that can be enough where, maybe you're looking at that stuff and you're like, oh wait, like this seems off, right? Or you can at least feel good about like, all right, stuff is continuing to work as we have it. But yeah, like do some things to keep that stuff top of mind. Basically, don't take for granted that the things that you build are going to work 100% of the time. And actually, on the topic of building, getting into our fourth one here. So not building for scalability. So let's talk a little bit about that, Mark.
Yeah, sure. So I think that, yes, it's important to think about the near term and right now and surviving to tomorrow. But, you have to always kind of bake in the fact that as you grow and succeed, the things that you do today, the systems that you put in place, have to help you get to that next point. And so as you're building in things today, processes, solutions, whatever it is, it has to be something that you can ride to the next stage and add on to, so that it doesn't lock you in, that you're not kind of stuck at this stage and unable to kind of transition to the next stage. And, especially in a time of companies in hyper growth and they're not, attuned to this, it can get real bad real quick. And there's all sorts of stories about this, and a lot of the companies end up kind of skating through it, but they have, and some companies don't. And so it's super important, if you make decisions today that end up limiting you in the future, it's something to consider. So yeah, I'd love to, we can jump into some of Anthony's fun stories on this one. And this is, I think, the first actual train wreck GIF that we're using. So.
Yep. I'm happy you made it all the way to 4 without pulling one out. So this one is, it was pretty early in my career. I wasn't in RevOps yet, but I did see the effects of it. So I was at a company that was mostly a usage-based company, and the way the company thought of growth was revenue. And one thing that company didn't do for a really long time is have any concept of a go-to-market lifecycle. So lead stages, sales stages, have a good entry exit criteria, like that backbone and foundation just wasn't there. And they went from 0 to 15 million or so without having a backbone and foundation of that. And which you think is like, wow, that's great. They didn't even need this process to do that, which was great until they got to the point where they needed to plan and didn't have any data for planning. So, going from when you're trying to double or grow at those rates at that size, you can't really do it on the backs of a few big deals or one great partnership. You have to really start to build a scalable, repeatable process. And you can't even do that unless you have the data to plan for it. How many people do we need? How much investment do we need in marketing? They had just finished a Series B fundraising, so they had some capital to deploy and really didn't have the level of detail to be able to deploy it properly. So that was, building something that's not scalable. Our marketing and sales processes were just not scalable. It was not something that we can continue to do. And it felt like this train approaching the wall, and it just felt like the company was hitting a wall and not able to even know what to do next. And that's why I think I'm not saying you need to over process, but I think having a simple go-to-market life cycle from day one is really, really important to have. So you understand what it takes to go from lead to cash and everything in between, and start tracking it early. So that way, when you're ready to make those decisions, or you have to double the next year, you can create a plan based on some data that makes sense.
Yeah. You got to have that like baseline data, even if it's not. And this, guys, is my favorite of all the GIFs, I have to say. Very excited about this one.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I actually, one of the manifestations of this, quote to revenue fail that I've seen over and over again, it's usually Google Sheets is like really good at helping you think that you can do it yourself, and then it just gets too complex too quickly and you're stuck with it. And so I've interacted with people that have done that a lot, where, for example, pricing calculators, let's say, or things of that nature. I'll just make it in Google Sheets. And maybe at the time when you make that decision, it makes sense. But as things grow and new SKUs are added and pricing changes and discounting and all these things, and adding services, and it becomes way too much for a Google Sheet, and people end up getting stuck in that. And I've definitely interacted with folks that are like way beyond the time where that's like a scalable solution. And I have fallen into the Google Sheets trap many times. I have several going right now that are just absolute messes. But I think that we all have to be a little bit some humility as to when that the utility of something like that is no longer there.
Yeah. And the thing that I'll add, and someone I remember someone gave me this advice early on too, was like like those problems or annoyances or like challenges you have with like say, you know, some like manual process or things like that now, or like lack of data, those are never gonna get better, right? Like they're never gonna go away. Meaning if you have something that is annoying you today or bothering you today, assuming you continue to grow, like that is only going to get worse and worse and worse and more painful until at some point, like you just simply can't operate if it still exists, right? So keep that in mind when you, like you said, Mark, if you're starting with Google Sheets or like these other things that you're, you know, like manual workaround, right? You know, they're going to create some problems, annoyances, things like that. Those will not get better as you grow. Right. So just think about the solutions that you are implementing and yeah, try to think ahead, right? Where you can. The lead to cash process is a great one, like you mentioned, Anthony. And actually, I was talking to another software startup founder who's now Series A, Series B, and he brought up this other example. One of the things he was like, "Oh yeah, we're about to close our fiscal year at the end of January," and I was like, "Oh, how long have you been on a fiscal calendar year? Because normally companies don't start there." And he was like, "Oh." He's like, man, when I was in RevOps at this last company I was working for, I had this whole project where we had to like move from a calendar year end to a fiscal year end. And it was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. So as soon as we started this software company, he was like, everything was January, like fiscal year end. He's like, because I never wanted to go through any of that stuff. Right. So again, that's one great example where like he was just getting the business started and he was already thinking about that. So again, like think about those things that you can do now that can eliminate some of the pain in the future.
Yeah, I think that foundation's super important. And the same, do it as soon as you start. I just a lean scale example, when I started lean scale, it's really common for services companies to do like cash accounting. And I knew, you know, I said, I'm not sure when this is going to become important, but we're going to start with accrual accounting. I know it's a little bit more complex. It doesn't follow your cash flow as much. So you have to do a little bit of mental math for this type of company to figure it out. But if we ever wanted to take on capital, if we ever wanted to get acquired, if we ever wanted to acquire another company or merge or something, um, it's going to be important that we start that way. And I think just make those are just decisions. It's not necessarily much more complex. It's just a decision to have the right foundation for the future you see for your company.
Yep, exactly. And so on the last in the last 9 or 10 minutes we've got here, we can hit on the fifth kind of RevOps fail to avoid on disconnected
Yeah.
incentives. And I can't remember what the name of this train is. My kids used to watch this
Oh,
show.
it's Thomas.
Well, is this Thomas?
Oh
Is
no,
the
this isn't Thomas. This is part of the Thomas universe. I couldn't tell you exactly which character it is, but
Oh yeah, no, I used to
It's
know all the names of these.
Goff Thomas.
Uh, yeah.
yeah. So to tee up this, this category, it's I see it as similar to some of the guardrail stuff, though, maybe with the intention of the person involved being less nefarious, right? I mean, you make decisions about what you want to measure people on or what your goals are. And if you make those decisions outside, in a vacuum without considering external forces or the bigger picture, you don't realize what it is you're incentivizing, and that could have all sorts of effects downstream that you may not have considered. So you're like, oh well, this KPI is down, all right, we are going to incentivize whichever team on this KPI, but you don't realize that if you do that, that affects this other team or this other KPI. And I don't know, I always kind of get a chuckle out of that, because I just imagine when people make those decisions, they think they're being really smart, and then just kind of completely oblivious to the bigger picture. And so Anthony's got some really fun ones, let's say, quote unquote. Probably wasn't fun at the time, that I got a kick out of. So let's kick it off with the first one.
Yeah, I thought I was being smart with this one too. I wasn't. I was completely the opposite. So this is back at the usage-based company I was working at. A lot of our contracts at the time had really low minimum commitments, and then they would just use as much as they needed. And there was a sentiment that that wasn't as valuable as getting committed revenue. So we could show, hey, this is contracted, we can count on this revenue. And also at that time, we were moving from a hunter farmer sales process to a pod structure where you have the sales person hunt new logos, also do expansion, and then you have the CS team as a support layer. Now I was in RevOps at this time, and we were changing the commission plan, and we wanted to incentivize getting committed revenue. So we thought something that would be really important is to have, like, outside of the main comp plan, we'll have a spiff. And this was during the second quarter, and it went down in infamy. We call it the infamous Q2 spiff. So we would pay a percentage of any committed revenue that you had with one of your accounts. So I think it was 5% or something. And one of the things we anticipated is, okay, we know the price per unit might come down to get committed, but we'll just make sure, like, we don't approve any discounts or we don't approve anything that's crazy. And we make sure, we have our calculus of what discount we think is worth it to have a secured amount of revenue. So we're okay giving a little bit there. So we kind of thought our bases were covered. What we were not expecting is, one, the volume of committed contract requests that were coming in. So it wasn't just a handful of our big customers. It was almost every single customer that we had, which we had hundreds of customers at that time. And we were also not expecting reps to have a conversation with customers to start verbalizing potential discount tiers and where things might go and what they might be able to do. And then inorganically creating this pressure from customers to commit or churn. And they wanted aggressive discounts. And we had a lot of churn risk if we didn't offer certain discounts to get the level of revenue committed. So what ended up happening is we massively decreased the value of some of the accounts that we had because, we didn't necessarily want to call the bluff on some of them. And at the same time, we're paying out just egregious commission checks to people who are creating smaller value situations than before. Normally it's okay. Hey, yeah, if you bring in revenue, you want to pay as much as you can to keep that going. But in this case, we're paying a lot of money to reduce the value of the customer base. And in the end, I don't think it made much of a difference on valuation or anything like that. So that is probably the biggest train wreck that I have been a part of. And everyone who's at that company still talks about it. So like I said, the infamous Q2 spiff is
yeah, everyone wants to be famous, right? So
that's that's awesome. And again, you can see where all the intentions were I guess were good or right in terms of people, wanting to understand, wanting to drive, committed revenue, right? And then reps being like, okay, like, if you're going to incentivize me with this, I'll go out and get you committed revenue, but not looking at the end result in terms of the value equation and what you were going to be left with. So how did you well, I mean, I guess it sounds like, one, you obviously you paid all those people out on their spiffs, but then going forward, I guess, Anthony, how did you evaluate? Did you do any spiffs in the future at that company afterwards, and what did you do to make sure that you didn't run into that same sort of issue?
Yeah, I was really reluctant to do spiffs after that. And there's a reason why it's called the Q2 spiff, not the 2019 spiff.
Right.
We quickly reeled it back. It just makes me think of, like, what could possibly go wrong when I put this in front of people. When I put this incentive in front of someone, like, what are all the goofy things that could happen, or weird behaviors that could cause? And is it worth it? And can we properly control it? So, it's not that I didn't put thought into it, but maybe I spend 5, 10 times more thought put into something before putting out any type of compensation change.
Yeah.
And spiffs, I like to keep them very very, very, very specific, and only very sparingly as well, not loading up a bunch of spiffs at the same time.
Yeah. And like you said, what can go wrong will go wrong at some point. And so, like you said, as you're thinking through those things, especially on the incentive side, right? Like do the math for that worst case scenario, right? Be like, okay, well, what if this crazy thing happens where, like every single customer that we have gets this sort of discount and we get this much committed revenue and we multiply that by 5%, like what's that number? Like just in case like something crazy like that happens, you're like, wow, that's a big number, right? Like so go through those scenarios. Don't, again, we talked about a couple of times ago, right? The guardrails to put in place, and even with a tight knit team like that, when you have trust and intentions are good, and even with this, right? Everyone's doing what they were, call it incentivized or motivated to do. It just turns out it led to something that didn't produce the outcome that the company wanted.
Yeah, and they didn't do anything wrong. I was just gonna say they didn't do anything wrong, so I think the company did the right thing in just honoring it. If you make a deal, then keep your side of the deal. And also, just to add the cherry on top, there's also all the opportunity costs of them focusing fervently on this and not focused on getting new logos or expanding actual organic usage of the account. So yeah, it was a big miss for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are basically at time. And so with that, I want to just say thank you to Mark and Anthony for sharing some war stories, some train wrecks, some examples for being vulnerable, humility, all that good stuff. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who attended and kind of joined, who asked questions. If you all want to continue the conversation with Mark, Anthony, anyone here, you can do that in the RevOps Co-op Slack group. But since we are at time, I will let everyone run, and I'll see you all on the flip side for our next one. So take it easy, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.